What is up, podcast land? Welcome to another episode of the Two Dates and a Dash podcast. I'm your host, Matt Cubbler, and before I introduce my buddy, Jim Bruni, it's a great story. We're two dads that just love our kids and love sharing in the joy that they receive from playing sports and just growing and becoming awesome humans. So this is a different kind of show than I've done before. I usually do a conversational, it's more of an interview, but there is some conversational component, but I'm really just letting the guest share their story. This is going to be two dads having a conversation at a bar, talking about their kids over a beer. And that's kind of the way. We've never done this before. And thank you to Jim for coming up with this idea. He reached out to me a couple of weeks ago, and I think it's a brilliant idea. And it's something that I think every parent that has a kid that plays a sport can sort of understand, no matter whether you have little kids who are just starting or big kids like ours who are just finishing. So where can you hear the podcast? Pretty much anywhere. iHeart, Pandora, anywhere that Two Dates and a Dash is at, that's where you're going to find it. iTunes, you name it. If you want to learn more about me and anything I'm doing with my book or my speaking or my other podcast, Third Shift Chronicles, go to mattcubbler.com. And I think that's pretty much all my information. Oh, Max Out, if you want to learn more about that, that's on maxoutstudio.com. And eForce, which is my other company, our manufacturing company, eForce Strength. So my man, Jim's, so Jim and I have known each other for a long time. I hang out as a cop. I like to spend a lot of time at his barbershop where I work, Stagliano's barbershop. Shout out to Al, Terry, Jack, and Paul. And Jim gets his haircut there, so we see each other a lot there. And it's just, the barbershop is like the guy's place to just sort of be a guy. So I've always enjoyed conversations I have with Jim there. So without further ado, Jim Bruni, how are you, buddy?
Hey, Matt, thanks for having me, man. And it's really cool to be on the screen rather than watching it, because I do watch your podcast a lot, and it's a lot of fun and real interesting to hear all the different topics. And now to actually be on the podcast is a big event for me. So thanks for having me, man. Hope this format awesome. Works well today.
So Jim is he's a sales guy. He works for Merck. He's been doing that for a long time. Married, got 3 kids. His middle daughter is the one we're going to spend the most time on. We'll talk about all our kids, but the parallels, because our daughters, his middle daughter and my oldest, are the same age, and both college athletes. So we both followed along with our kids' progressions and the triumphs and the tribulations, and we both have had a lot of conversations about how proud we are of our kids. So that's what this show is going to be about. So I ask the same question every single time to every single person. I'm going to ask you the same question. Who is Jim Bruni?
Who is Jim Bruni? I'm just one of those guys, Matt, like you see at the barbershop. I'm a local guy. I graduated from Methacton High School right in the area here back in 1984. Grew up in the area. So I was born in the Norristown area where my family is from. So spent, pretty much my whole life here. Moved away back when my wife and when we had our 3 kids, and had a job opportunity down south in Atlanta. So it was kind of nice to be able to move away, get a new experience. And all my kids were very young when we were down in Atlanta, so they got to grow up in that little different place. And then eventually my job moved me back here to Pennsylvania, where I've been ever since. So when I was at Methacton, I was a top student there, did really well. My parents demanded that. So I worked hard and was a pretty good student, because I knew that I wanted to go to college and that was going to get me there. But along the way, I was an athlete and I really enjoyed playing sports. So I was privileged to play 3 sports in high school. I played football, I wrestled, and I played baseball. So it was just, great for me, where I was able to play sports, do my work, be very successful. We won a lot of championships at Methacton, which at a young age, when you get the feeling of working hard at something, working together as a team, and then getting the championship and the win at the end, really kind of teaches you early on that, okay, let me put this together. I love sports, I work hard at it, and if I can work harder than somebody else and be successful, that's going to get me to the top. So I've always kind of had that mentality of kind of working hard at what I do, and had a little bit of talent. I was a running back at Methacton, and my senior year we won the championship and was the top running back in the area. So worked pretty hard with that, and I did enough to get one of the local colleges interested in me, and that was the University of Pennsylvania. So, most people think of Penn and the Ivy League as, a very highly academic school. So I was, hoping and keeping my fingers crossed that I had the grades and the SAT scores to get into a school like that. And I don't know how it happened, but I luckily maybe got in by the skin of my teeth. Football played a little part of it, but they weren't going to bring somebody in that they knew couldn't handle the academic side. So that was great. I got into Penn. Something else that happened in my senior year at high school was really gratifying to me, and probably the biggest accomplishment that I've had. You may be aware of it. There is an award, a Scholar Athlete Award, that's given to the local folks here in the Norristown area. It's called the William F. Danahauer Award. Judge Danahauer was a judge, and they named this award after him. And it started back in 1964. Actually, my cousin John Pergine, who you may know, he played football at Notre Dame, and went on to play in the NFL for the Rams and the Redskins. He was the first winner of this award. And as the name says, scholar athlete, it looked at, of course, scholastics, sports, and service, and you had to have a nice mix of both. And about 30 schools within the area nominate one senior for that award. And I was nominated by Methacton in '84, and as like I said, one of my most cherished moments is I won that award. It was really a great night for me, and the topping on it was the keynote speaker that night down at the Westover Country Club was Jerry Byrne, who was the University of Pennsylvania football coach at the time. So some people think something's going on here. You got the guy that won it, it's going to Penn. But it was a great moment and kind of culmination of fun high school. And then going to Penn, had a lot of challenges there. Going to that next level. I was a running back, like I said, and unfortunately for me, at the time I was at Penn, there were two other running backs who, at the end of their careers, finished 1-2 all time in rushing. So I literally had to kind of take a back seat to them. But every opportunity that I had, I took it, and had a pretty good career at Penn. Won 2 Ivy League championships. So once again, I'm part of that winning culture, winning team, and it just really validates the hard work and determination. And then from there, you graduate from college, you get a job, you have kids, you get married. So that's kind of all, kind of came into fruition after college. Stayed in the area. Like I said, I moved away for 5 years. Did a lot of coaching as my kids grew up. And like you said earlier, actually Anna is my oldest. You know Nick from coming into the.
Oh, he's not. I thought he was the oldest.
Yeah, well, he's the tallest. If you look at, if you look at me next to him, you're like, is this really the dad? Nick's about 6'2". He goes to Penn State. But Anna's a year older. So Anna this year was a senior. Nick's a junior at Penn State. And then my youngest, Isabella, just got accepted to the University of Alabama. So I think my girls like to go south and go to college there. But all in all, it's been a great, journey. And like you said, we kind of came together, seeing each other at the barber shop. And, I just thought it'd be a good idea to sit down and talk about some of these great things that we go through. Because I'm on Facebook like Matt is, and it's amazing during the swim season to just see all the posts that he puts up about Becca and her successes. And then I found myself doing the same with Anna, from a softball standpoint. and we'll talk about her. She plays softball down at the University of South Florida, and just was as successful as Becca is at Bloomsburg with swimming. So I think we have a lot of good things to talk about with our kids.
Oh, we do. Before we go any farther, I want to make sure we give a shout out, even though I know he's never going to hear this unless Terry or one of us shows it to him. But Coach Marinkoff is, so just to give everybody a little bit of a history on my relationship with Coach. Coach is a 3 to 4 times a day, comes into the barbershop, gets coffee, hurls out a couple insults, then gives you a couple of praises, kind of like a coach does, breaks you down and builds you back up. But he's in his late 80s. He's from the Hershey coal cracker area, and he's just a quintessential coach. And by the way, he still holds, and you have to. I love research. If everybody that's paying attention to me recently understands that, but I love looking up how people got to be who they are. So Coach was, and he still holds the record for the annual average return yards for a kickoff returner at North Carolina State. He tells stories about playing against Sam Huff and all these guys back in the 40s and 50s, and it's just amazing to listen to. Well, he was Jim's coach at Methacton High School for football, and I know you two are very close.
Yeah, we are, Matt, and it's great that he's always still been in this area. And to look back now to see, how he coached us. I mean, we were kids coming into his program back in the early 80s. And, when we left that program, I always say, Coach, we went in as kids, we came out as men, because he was a tough son of a bitch. I mean, and, there were times where, God, you think he was just trying to kill us in practice, but there was a method to his madness. And, he comes from the school of hard knocks. He's a tough college player, and you would never know to look at him. I mean, he's about 5'7", and he played at a high level, like you said, Matt, at North Carolina State, and led the nation in kickoff returning, back in the early 50s. But he knew what he was doing. I mean, he just worked us hard, and it all paid off because he knew the type of guys he had back in the day. We just had those, blue collar, lunch pail guys that just went out, and we weren't the biggest. I could remember our offensive line from tackle to tackle might have averaged 170 pounds at the most. But we had the toughest kids, and they would go against kids probably 30, 40 pounds heavier, and would push them down the line of scrimmage. If you looked at our senior year, which was very successful, like I said, we won the Suburban One championship back then. I was a running back, of course, you said, and we also had another fullback who was an excellent runner. His name's Mike Wood, and both of us had over 1,000 yards rushing that year, and that was pretty big. I know that these days they run a little, not as much. They pass a lot, but back when we did, we had such a good running attack that they knew we were going to run at them. So they would give it to me, they'd give it to Mike, and we would just go up and down the field. And it was because of those guys in front of us that cleared the path. And I think at the end of the year, we might have had, this is no lie, Matt, maybe 400 yards passing for the entire year. Wow. Some guys in high school today, they throw that in a game or two. But it was pretty amazing. But yeah, Coach, we just, I think I told you, we had a 35-year reunion at the Trap back in November. And if you could have saw Coach's face, because I had called up all the old guys, and the testament to Coach Marinko, Matt, was that there were guys that live in Massachusetts, North Carolina, you name it. Not everybody was around here, but every guy, once I told them that we're going to have a 35-year reunion, and Coach Marinko and all the other coaches are going to be there, we had almost 100% of the guys come. And if you would have saw Coach's face, I mean, he was beside himself. And the funny thing was, I didn't see him drink. He doesn't drink a lot, but that night he might have had about 5 or 6 beers. But he'll only tell you he only had 2. That's just him. You know what I'm talking about. But yeah, great guy, and real father figure to a lot of us, and that's what he does right now, is being that he's in his mid-80s. The thing that keeps him going is people like me giving them a call, and like we do, we reminisce and we talk about the good old days, and that's what keeps him going. And I think that's why he coached so long, because he just loves the kids.
I think that's it's an analogy for sports and even for being a dad. Like, once you've been through a situation like that where you had a coach that was that important in your life, you kind of recognize when your kids are in the midst of someone that's giving them that. And you recognize the value that if it's not you, and I was the worst dad coach because I want so badly for my kids to be successful that I couldn't not be harder on them, like extremely hard on them, for the minorest details that other kids would have never even had any comment about, that I became counterproductive to their growth. So I had to step back as a coach. And I recognized that someone else needed to have that role in my kid's life. And I'm a huge believer in mentorship and having a mentor in your life. And that sometimes isn't a mom or dad. Sometimes it's a coach, sometimes somebody like me, like that. You have to have that person that is the person that, not that they look up to them more than they may you, but it's a different way of giving information and receiving information that may be the same message that you're giving, but how they receive it is just different. And I think it's important, and it's hard as a parent to sort of think that someone else is filling a role that you feel you should be filling. But you have to look at it from the global perspective and say, in the growth of my kid, and then retrospectively look at your own life and see how did I get here? You're a great guy. I'm a great guy. How did I become a great guy? Like, who were the people in my life that had those impacts? And it wasn't just my mom and my stepdad. I had so many other people. And once you put it in those contexts, you realize there has to be other voices. There has to be other influences in our kids' lives. And I think coaches, without a doubt, if you get a really good one, and Coach Marinko is the man. I literally, my heart feels better whenever I see him. And I just know he's like, I want to see him every day, because first of all, he is older. But he's so full of life and so full of like his wit and his ability to come back and drop an insult that is so, you're like, that was a perfect one. Like, how did you come up with that? And he's great with it. And I love when he hands me his flip phone and says, Matt, you know what to do. And I have to get rid of his messages. He doesn't have to delete like text messages and voicemails. He doesn't like any messages on his phone. So I have to clear his phone.
He's never set up his message. So you can't, if you call him on his cell phone, Matt, you can't leave him a message, because it'll get to the point where you're going to leave the message and they'll always say, this cell phone has not been set up. Oh. But like you said, that's him. He'll fight that, and that's where I think brought him to the end of his coaching career, because he coached a certain way and was so successful all these years, and it was a great blueprint. But I think the way things were done were done different, and he's the type of guy that he's not going to do it just because everybody else is doing it, and it forced him out, where he wanted to end on his terms, and unfortunately, it's hard to believe that he was let go at Methacton, which is something still that kind of upsets me, that the new regime came in. So, the folks that knew George along the way, they would have never done that. They would have let him go out on his terms. Unfortunately, he was coaching for such a long time that those people retired. Right. Now new people came in who didn't know the history and legacy of Coach, and they just saw it for what was going on. And he had a couple bad years, and they were ready to, just throw him out to dry. And we literally fought. We showed up at meetings saying, this can't happen to a guy like this. He's put so much into this school and this program that there's no way that this should happen. And we were really upset as an alumni. And unfortunately, you see it, Methacton now. It kind of hurts to see, one, they're not getting the turnout that they used to get. I mean, they might get 30 people out for a football program, and I'm seeing some of the scores, and they're really struggling. So it's hard as an alumni, where we felt we built this program to be one of the best, but you're seeing that with a lot of schools, Matt. Back in the 80s, it was Methacton, Upper Marion, Norristown. They were the powerhouse teams where all the tough kids went. And now it's 30 years later, it seems almost be the opposite, where the PVs and the Springfords, who we used to just run over, they're now the powerhouse team. So it's interesting how things kind of move along.
Well, I think, when we look back at our kids' lives, and I was an athlete, but I was not a hardworking athlete. I was not a naturally talented athlete. And I only really played sports because it gave me a chance to not be in my normal life. Like, it was my way of getting away from stuff that I didn't want to be thinking about or doing. But I never understood the value of hard work when I was younger. I was a smoke and mirrors kid. I could con my way through anything. I had a scam going for everything. I literally had a 4.0, never took a book home once in my life. I read one book from the time can remember reading until I was 36. And it was Animal Farms, the only book I ever read cover to cover, other than the Bible. But I literally could write a book report on a book I didn't read and get a 100 on it because I could bullshit better than any human being I knew. And that was me. And I always knew that. And at some point in time, I knew I was going to get exposed, and I did. And I had to figure out a new way of doing me, yet having the same level of success. Like, what do I need to do? And I had to learn that quickly because I had an appointment to the Coast Guard Academy that I didn't take because I knew that I was going to get exposed the minute I showed up because I didn't have study habits. I didn't know. I literally could just remember, dump, and forget. And I didn't have any ability to retain anything because I didn't have study habits. I didn't have learning habits. I had get through that moment habits. Yeah. And I had to learn how to do that when I went in the Army. I went Army intelligence, and I thought, Army, I'm just going to go run around and shoot shit. And I went intel, and I didn't really think that through. But I went and became a decoded messages. So anything that was cryptology, and what I didn't think about is that I sucked at like calculus and trig, and I knew just enough to get by, and I kind of had some dirt on a couple teachers, so I was able to leverage that and to get better grades. But I didn't recognize that everything in decoding is going from an unknown to a known, and I didn't know how to do that. I didn't have the brain width to learn that. And I was failing Intel school. And I had my instructor goes, you're a smart guy. What is the problem? I said, I don't know how to learn this. Yeah. Like, I can't unlock my brain. And I had to go to every night, and we would be in school 10 hours a day. And I'd go to 2 hours every night remedial because I was forced to, because I was failing. And then finally the guy taught me some techniques that taught me how to unlock parts of my brain. And that started my process of understanding the value of learning and how vulnerable I felt as a con artist, that when I was exposed, I never want to be in that position ever again. So I started working on building my foundation for learning and success from the time I was, 19 years old. But up until 19, I faked it till I made it. And that was my life. What about you?
You know what, Matt, you bring up a really good point, because I've actually seen this happen many, many times, is that, you go to high school and in your earlier years, you see the people that are smart and they don't have to apply themselves as much as somebody maybe like you or I, where you have to work a little harder. I had to work hard in whatever I did. Things didn't come easy to me. And looking back on that, I'm glad it was that way, because I built up study habits and I worked hard, and I wasn't afraid of challenges early on in my life where, I was busy. I told you earlier, I played 3 sports. So every day after school, I'm going to practice, and then I'm coming home and I'm probably tired, and go to the dinner table, have some food. And now it's, 6:30, and I still have probably a couple hours of studying to do, where the normal person who doesn't play sports, they're probably already done their studying after school. So I really had to discipline myself early on in life to say, hey, I'm playing sports, but I also have a responsibility, and I promised my parents that I would get good grades. So I had to work hard. And then the more I was successful in this kind of dual thing where, hey, I was a really good athlete, but then also every, quarter I'd come home and say, hey, Mom, look, all A's or A's and B's, and everything was going good. But then I'm glad that I had those study habits, because I'll tell you what, Matt, going to a college and going to an Ivy League school like Penn, I wouldn't have made it through if I didn't have those good study habits. And I'm thinking, like with your story, if I just kind of got through high school and I was getting all A's, but I really didn't apply myself. I saw this with some people at college, is that, they struggled because they just didn't have the way to study and to do well required a lot of hard work. And, that's kind of was their thing. And I think that's what really, you take that parallel to really anything you do in life, is that, I'd rather take somebody who is a hard worker that I know is going to just continually get better and better versus somebody who, may have the talent and just tries to get by on just what they know. And, you look back and you see everything that you've tried. Now, I'm not going to say that everything that I put my mind to, I've achieved, but I will say that a good majority of it I have achieved because of the hard work and ethic that I've done in it. So
I think and we look at our kids now, right? So my daughter is
he's a stud.
But she literally is the kid that never got anything handed to her. She wasn't gifted with, like, I was the guy in high school. I didn't have athletic ability. I didn't have effort. So I was just a con artist. Like, I didn't have either. I wasn't the guy that just sort of lived off of God-given talent that didn't work hard. And I wasn't the guy that outworked everybody. I was the guy that blended those two things together when having neither as actual assets.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the value I got from that is I know exactly now how I got to where I was and where that threshold is, where the ceiling is on that type of life. And then I realized learning later, when I figured out how to work hard and apply myself and put effort and all that, where that takes you. And it's like, here was where I was. I can get to here. And had I not known that or not learned how to work hard, I wouldn't be able to be the dad that I am to my kids. And my daughter, when we first, when your kids are growing up, when they're 5, 6, 7 years old, you start to notice tendencies and traits, who they, stuff they take from the mother, stuff they take from you, and then their own individual traits. And I realized early on that my daughter was hyper focused on details. Ever since she was, whether it was reading, if I read a book, you'd read the same book 3,000 times because they get addicted to a book when they're 4. And I would start making shit up because I was tired of reading the same story. She knew exactly what word was on that page even before she could read. And if I deviated from that page and said something wrong, she knew it. And she would, no, daddy, no, daddy. And I had to go and read the whole thing the correct way because the details mattered.
Yep.
And when I recognized that, I started to watch as sports and education became part of her life. Once you get into school, and she was doing gymnastics, and she really was just swimming, like to learn how to swim, to have the skill of swimming, so she didn't drown at the beach. And you realize the even though she wasn't very good at either, her attention to the details, like toe pointing and all, like in gymnastics, like how do you finish, where are your hands at when you go ta-da, and like all those little details she was mastering. But she wasn't very good at the actual tumbling or cartwheels or whatever. But the details, the attention to trying to get the details right, is what I really noticed about my daughter. And as she started to progress, as she got older, the education stuff, she mastered that. Her study habits and her attention to being right every time was what propelled her to a 4.0. And that was hard work. That was 6 hours a night. Whether she needed 6 hours a night, I had no idea. Or if she just felt that if I don't do 6 hours a night, I'm not going to do well.
Right.
And do more because that's what's worked before. And now that she's technically done swimming, I hope she's not technically done, but according to the NCAA, she's done, and to college she's done, but there's still another potential afterwards. But you look back on it and you see that the processes she created to learn in school and the processes she created to become better in swimming were parallel. And the effort level, the attention to detail in both is what allowed her to do both very well at the same time. What was it like when Anna was little? What was do you remember like seeing the first glimmer of something? Like, did you identify a moment in time when she was little?
Oh yeah, I absolutely identified it. So Anna was a troublemaker when she was young, and she would get into trouble, and she would get to a point where I was very upset with her, where I wanted to kind of grab her. I'm not going to grab her to hit her, but I just needed to get to her. And I would chase her around the house, Matt. And, we get to the proverbial, she's on the other side of the table. And I said, okay, I got her. So I go, to the right, and I can't get her. I mean, she was that fast, and I'm chasing her all around the house. So I knew at an early age that she had, maybe a little bit of my athletic ability from a standpoint of being fast. Okay. And so I'm thinking, all right, this is great. So, we, like I told earlier, we moved down to Atlanta when she was about 4 years old. And as you know, down in the South, they're just passionate about their sports down there. So she gravitated towards softball as one of her sports. And we had her in the tryouts. And down there, they take about all the players, and they put them through these tests one day to figure out, okay, 1 from 100, how are we going to grade all these girls before the draft? And I was a coach, and they did things where they were running, throwing, catching, the whole thing, and she just graded off the charts. So out of those 100 girls that were, at the time, 6, 7 years old, she was the number 1 ranked person. And of course, since I was coaching, she was going to be on my team. So at that point, we knew that we had a good athlete. Okay. And for her earlier years in softball, that athletic ability really kind of took her through, similar to kind of how you got through high school, Matt, with just, being a smart, you're going to get through. So she did really well from a standpoint of being a great athlete, running, throwing, the whole thing. Early on in her career, she was a right-handed batter. So somebody came up to me one day and said, hey, you know what? You should teach your daughter to bat left-handed, because just from the way you look at it, she's going to be that much closer to first base. So if she can kind of get the ball in play, maybe a bunt, maybe something, where the infielder has to move a little bit, she's going to be that much closer to first base. And with her speed, even if it's a ground ball to, say, the shortstop, by the time the shortstop gets the ball and throws it over the first, with her speed, she's going to beat it out. So, so she started to learn how to literally bat, from the left-hand side. And over the years, that's become more of an art now. And you'll see in high school softball and travel softball, all the way up to college softball, that person who does that is called a slapper. Okay, and a lot of you folks may know that, where these girls come up and their whole approach to the at bat is, because of their speed and the way they can get kind of a head start, they're going to try to slap the ball, whether it's into the ground and kind of pop it up in the infield, or bunt the ball sort of between the catcher or the pitcher. And that's what Anna kind of made her career about, was doing that and creating havoc and beating the throws out, I would say 9 times out of 10. And then once she's on first base, guess what? Guess what she's doing?
Stealing.
She's stealing second. So she would, the coaches would put her at the top of the lineup, and just like any type of leadoff hitter, you're, on first base, you're attempting to steal. You can probably be at second base with no outs, and then it, kind of goes from there. So she got to a point where she kind of perfected this, and where most players were hitting, what's the average in baseball or softball that kind of says that you're doing pretty well, around 300, right? Well, like this year when Anna was playing her senior year, and unfortunately the season got cut short because of the coronavirus, Anna was leading the American Athletic Conference with a 476 batting average, which also placed her in the top I think it's 20 in the nation. Through 25 games, she had 39 hits, which were, I think, 7th in the nation. So, and I know Becca was doing these, getting these great times, at the NCAAs, and these are the types of times, Matt, where you start to think, oh my gosh, I mean, to see where she came from, where she started when she was, 5 years old to where she is now, and she made a conscious effort once she got to South Florida, which is, as many a Division I school. They're usually ranked in the top, I would say, 30 to 35 teams. Now we're also including, the SEC teams in that conversation. So all the top teams you see on ESPN, UCLA, Florida State, all these teams. South Florida is in the conversation, maybe a level below, but it's amazing to know that she said to me, she's like, Dad, many people may not think I can play at that Division I level, but I'm just going to work harder than anybody, and I'm going to put the time in, and I'm going to get to that level. And to see her get there, struggle. Now her sophomore year was a very tough year for her, Matt. She got some time her freshman year because of a girl in front of her got injured, and she was actually, as a freshman, got some really good playing time and actually did well. So her thoughts were, okay, I got in as a freshman. I'm coming back as a sophomore. I'm just going to keep growing. But guess what? She digressed as a sophomore. Couple technical things, but she was pretty down, and I was concerned that she was losing confidence in herself, and it was a tough time. But she worked through it and came back. Her junior year, had a great year last year, and then was doing very well and was a first team all conference. And I would say if the year finished out, she had a really good chance of being an All-American this year, just like that. And it just goes to show that you put the work in. And the most important thing I always tell you is that you're going to get knocked down, right? You're going to fail. Things aren't going to go your way, and that's okay. The point is that, are you going to pick yourself back up? And then guess what? You're going to get knocked down again. And are you going to pick yourself back up? I remember a couple of weeks ago, Matt, when Beck was at the NCAAs, you were telling me how by the third or fourth day, her body is pretty much done, and she has to she was trying to recover for that last race, I guess. And I would think, and I was trying to get in her mind, what's her mind thinking that last night where her body is pretty much done. She's really expended all this energy, but she knows she has one more race to go. What is her mindset at that point? Is it, hey, I've got to this point, I'm really feeling down, I don't know if I can do it? Or is it, what, just let me dig a little deeper and, push through it. And it looks like that's what she did.
But we have a process. So we do a thing. And it's literally since she was in high school, every time that she would have especially in college, more so because in high school there's very few multiple day meets. There's one or two out of the year. But in college, she was doing 3 to 4 day long meets where it's just high level competition. And we get to the point every time, and we have the pre-meet, the 2 weeks before, working on her nutrition, working on her sleep, working on her hydration, just making sure that she's optimally prepared for it physically and mentally. But then once we get to the 4th or 5th day of a meet, she'll go, and it's usually she's a distance swimmer, and if she only had to swim like 50s and 100s, she probably could do that all day long. But she has to go. It's always the last day, which is the mile, and a mile is 66 laps. And when you think about that, that's 17 minutes of racing. So I always say to her, she's like, Dad, I really just don't want to fucking do this. And I said, I know you don't. I said, your body is hurting. I said, I've been with you the last 4 days. I know exactly what you're feeling. Not physically, I don't, but I understand based on being around you for the last 20-some years of your life. I said, but here's what I know. I said, you can have the greatest first 3 races, and then shit the bed on the last one. And the thing you're going to leave people with is that you just didn't give a shit. I said, and I don't care if you sink to the bottom of the pool. I will jump out of the stands and I will come save you. I said, but you have one option, and that is to finish as strong as you started. I don't care if you die in the pool. I will come get you. You will never, ever, ever die. But if you just can't do anymore, I want to see that, because that's the thing that's going to define who you are, not how fast you went in your first race, because that's when everybody goes fast, because they're all fresh. It's when you got kicked in the teeth for 4 days and your body feels like it got hit by a bus. Some people just pack it in because it's just too hard. And the rest of them go, the ones that are the best go, I can give it one more. And I learned that, and because I want to ask Anna about Anna's her preparation and how she got herself ready. But I'd always thought in my life, from the time I went in the Army on, not before, because I already talked about how I'd smoked and mirrored that. But when I really thought I was learning how to give my best effort, I always thought that I knew that, at that moment I did. I definitely gave 100%. Or in that moment I did. I gave 100%. And I thought that throughout my life. I did that many times. And it wasn't until I ran across the state of New Jersey in 2008 where I physically broke bones. I had 6 broken bones in my feet. I had a seizure at mile 40, that the last 6 miles I had to run were the most painful moments of my entire life. I physically felt like every step I took, I wanted to throw up. And I ran every step of 78.8 miles. And when I finished that is the moment when I realized I've actually given my very best. And it's the only time in my life I've actually done it. And but I now know what that is. I may never, ever do it again. I may never be asked to do something that extreme again, where everything I got mentally, emotionally, physically, I have to put into it. I've given physically sometimes, I've given emotionally sometimes, I've given mentally sometimes, but never all 3 together. And if I ever have to do that again, I know what it feels like. And I wanted my daughter to understand that that's championship level mentality. I don't care if you don't win. This isn't about winning. I didn't run 78.8 miles fast. I ran 78.8 miles. And I did it when I said I was going to do it. And I did it under the most extreme, painful circumstances known to man. And I finished it. And all I ever want my kids to do is finish with the same effort level you started with, finish in the end. And that's kind of our thing. But we always, every race, before every mile, we have the same conversation. And I start to smirk. She goes, we have to go through this. So, like this is just her way of validating that, yes, I'm still holding her to that same level of standard. And yes, she knew she's got to go produce it. And she never once disappointed. Never. So what was that like when Anna would go, like, and I played baseball, but I don't really understand softball a whole lot as far as especially for somebody who's a specialist, I'll call her. I know what Becca had to do all year long, lifting weights, practices. I mean, Becca kept a journal. She, like I said, attention to details. She literally has every practice and meet she's ever swam, and what the breakdown of each set was she had to do, and what the times were that they were telling her she had to swim in and practice. And so she knew every year, at the end of the year, the culmination of that time, what did that get me? And when you talk about Anna being, in the top 20 in the country in hitting and hits and all that stuff, and where that process was getting her to, the culmination of that, that's an important process. Becca can go back and look at any year and tell you why she either succeeded or didn't, based on variable changes that she would see during this period. I really wasn't doing well. I need to make a change here. And that took her to here. Like those details are important. What about Anna?
Very similar, Matt. I mean, you have to have, and her coach preaches attention to details to a point where, it's funny, they're practicing. And of course she got softballs all over the place. What he does, he numbers every softball. Okay. So say there's 75 softballs that are out there. And at the end of practice, he makes them go and get every softball and line them up to make sure that all 75 are still there. And it just reinforces that attention to detail. The other point, I think, once again, very similar, is time management.
Oh, yeah.
And time management is essential for any college athlete or even college student, because the way I look at it is the information that is taught at college is maybe a little bit more intense than what you would just be learning in high school, but it's all about time management, and because there's more of it, and you really have to manage your time, and especially if you're an athlete, because when Becca and Anna are at school, they don't get any treatment of that. Okay, well, you're an athlete. That means that it's easier for you. It's actually harder for them because they got to be a student and an athlete at the same time. And the only way you can do that is to manage your daily time in a way that you can complete everything. So I was just very impressed with Anna, and she was always pretty good about it, but she got to a point where, like you probably saw with Becca, I mean, she had a journal of what her day looked like from the time she got up, Matt, to the time she went to bed. And it was listed out, like that. And in college, it's not like they would practice at every, the same time every day. The coach would look at, okay, I got 20 girls here. I have their schedules. I'm going to practice around the schedule. So sometimes they were practicing at 7 a.m. in the morning, 7 to 10, because on that day, many of the girls might be, in that. So actually, I have my daughter walking in right now. How you doing, honey? Yeah, come here. Come around here for a sec. I want to introduce you to my friend here. Sit down here for a sec.
Hello.
Hi, Anna. How are you?
I'm good.
This is
How are
Matt.
you?
We're
Your
actually
ears
live
ringing?
right now.
We're on a podcast, so don't drop any F-bombs unless you need them. Because I'll drop one, but I don't know if you want that out there. I don't mind my F-bombs being out there.
Right.
Matt just asked me a question of how you manage your time and be successful in college with all these things that you're doing. And I was telling him how you journal everything and your day is regimented. But he was asking about that. And I want to see if you maybe can tell him.
This is live.
Yeah, just go ahead. Just say hi.
Well, we can do interviews and stuff, but just like, talking as a friend to friend. Like my dad said, just kind of put everything in my agenda book, fun stuff like that. Really nothing crazy. I just have all my reminders set, and we have a set schedule. So
Just so you know, your dad and I'm a cop in Collegeville. So this isn't, I'm not a reporter, but.
Oh yeah. No, I know.
My daughter's same age as you, college swimmer, right? Yeah.
That's awesome.
So understanding the reason why we're doing the show is we're trying to put out there so other parents that have kids that are athletes, that maybe they're younger kids and they want them to work towards getting into a college athletic situation, like how hard that actually is. Like when you as a dad or as a kid, that this meshing of our want and desire for you to be your very best, because that's our love for you guys, and we want you to have as much success as possible, because that's a reflection of us. And then also teaching you and then having you work through your own set of like growth principles, that how do I become better, and how do I identify in myself where I need more work, or how did I get to this point? And like my daughter, I was telling your dad that, she has a journal that she's had since 9th grade that has every practice she's ever had and every race she's ever swam. And she tracks it so that at the end of every year, she goes back, and if she reached her goals, she still goes back and assesses everything, but she knows how she got there.
Right.
And if she comes short, she goes back, looks at the areas where she saw the deficiencies, and makes adjustments so that she can get to where she needs to be. Now,
working on your weakness.
Right. And when you're, especially with you, and we were just talking about this before we walked in, that you're a specialist. Like you had a specialty that made you unique, in a world of, that's, I don't know how many kids are on a softball team, but 20 kids, and multiply that by X number of schools, you're in the top 2% of all of them, and you found your niche. So my daughter's a distance swimmer. You found your niche as a left-handed slapper or whatever.
Yeah.
You use speed. Like, how did you work towards getting great at that?
It's just a lot of practice. I remember, taking lessons in high school, because I was originally a righty hitter. So, my dad and I, we would just practice out by, the field out back that we have. And then just, again, like writing down tips for my lessons and just kind of taking that and working on it every single day. I mean, it's fun too. Like, I'm about to go out and hit in the driveway right now. But it's just practice. Like, if you find something that you love, it's not work, you know, it's something that is enjoying, and it's just a nice thing to do. So
How did you manage? Because my daughter, literally, it's like you're identical human beings, just different sports. Is, you know, she's a 3.9 GPA, double major.
mm-hmm.
You're a 3.8, 3.9 GPA. You guys are. How did you manage to be great at both things at the same time?
It's time management.
I mentioned
literally
that.
what it is.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, if you have your eyes on the prize for both, like, you know what you have to do to accomplish each thing, and there's no room for dilly-dallying or, you know, slacking off on that end. So, I mean, really, it just comes down to time management, and if you want to put the work in, you'll get it. You know,
There's a lot of kids that you know on your team and probably on other teams throughout the country that don't do that.
Yeah.
Like, they do the minimum scholastically to keep them eligible, and then redirect that time towards whether it's the sport or not, but there's always a redirection of time into something else that they find more valuable. Why did you decide that both of those components, because you didn't have to, I mean, obviously your dad probably would have stuck his foot up your ass, but you didn't have to, like, physically, to be a college softball player, you have to maintain a 2.5 or whatever it is, and you could have been the 2.5 kid and still been great at softball and allocated that time to something else. Why did you choose to be great at both?
Well, I mean, you know, for me, I can't play softball forever. And so I have my plan, obviously, go to nursing school afterwards. And that's important to me, too, is my academics, and something that, you know, a goal that I have, obviously, after softball ends. You know, I still want to keep softball in my life one way or another. Like, I'll be playing definitely after for something, or, you know, giving lessons and stuff that I do that I enjoy. But I mean, the end goal is I definitely want to make a life for myself as well. So having, you know, top grades is a competitive field going into, and trying to get into a good school, like, that's all important to me. So I just kind of knew that going in. And I mean, I've always been, school doesn't come easy to me, but as easy as softball does, but I definitely work hard for the grades that I get, and I know that it pays off. And obviously, you know, getting into Thomas Jefferson and stuff like that showed that it's paid off. So, yeah, it's exciting.
If you had a tip for any kid that's in high school, we'll say high school age, student athlete, no matter what sport, what would your one, if you looked back and you reverse time and you could hover over top of your 4 years of high school and watch everything transpire, what would be the one thing that you saw that got you to the point where you could be successful, not just get to college and play a sport, but to get there and then figure out how to become great at something? Because at the end of the day, I always tell my daughter this, she's going to graduate from Bloomsburg University, which has had a very strong swimming program for 100 years, as the single greatest female swimmer in the history of that school. And that didn't happen because she was God-given talent, or there was so much. If you could go back and watch the video of her life and just look at the effort that she put in to get to that point, you're going to graduate South Florida as one of the greatest softball players in the history of that program. And that didn't happen by accident. So what would be the one thing that you could tell a kid who is athletically driven, has a passion for her sport? What would that tip be to get them to figure out how to become great as well?
It's funny you say that, because it's funny looking back, like, obviously for my 4 years of college and stuff, and there's one thing, and it's nice that I get, like, a new year too, it comes with experience, but the biggest thing is to not put pressure on yourself. You know, you can't put pressure on yourselves to, you know, get as many steals or beat her swimming record. Like, if you put that pressure on yourself, you're not going to be able to clear your mind and play to your full ability, like your full ability. So that's when I don't think, and I just, you know, in my head there's 2 + 2 = 4. That's the best time I play, is because I don't have so many things going in my mind telling me I have to beat this goal, or I have to, you know, be the best player on the field. Like, I just play, and my athletic ability takes over. All the hard work that you put in outside the game, outside your competition, whatever, you know, sport that you play, like, that's probably the best moments you'll have in your career whenever you get to your college sport is just playing for like the little boy or girl that fell in love with that sport. That's just the biggest thing, because if you make it all about numbers and if you make it all about, you know, pressing to be, you know, better than somebody else and comparing yourself to other people, then you lose like where you came from and why you're playing the game. And that just kind of overshadows everything that you work for outside of your competition. So just play, have fun, and take your pressure off yourself.
Let me ask you one more question before I switch back to your dad.
Yeah.
When he was talking about you when you got to South Florida, your freshman year, you got some playing time because somebody got injured, and you did pretty well. And then your sophomore year, you kind of had a hurdle, like a setback, where you didn't have as much success, and it was a harder adjustment your sophomore year versus your freshman year. What do you think it was? Because when you just mentioned the putting the pressure on yourself, is that what you found yourself doing your sophomore year?
Absolutely. Yeah. 100%. Like my freshman, sophomore year versus my senior, junior year, night and day, just of how I approached everything. I had a different approach and a mental mindset. So I definitely became mentally more tough my last year. So.
And do you think that did that come from a self-assessment of, I'm going to look back and see, how did I not accomplish what I thought I was going to accomplish those first 2 years? And did you recognize that was the key factor that kept you from success? Or was that something that collectively, through your coaches, your dad, your mom, everybody sort of just came to an understanding that you probably were putting too much pressure on yourself? I'm just curious whether it was self-assessment or group assessment.
Just a little bit of both. Like my dad and I talk sometimes, or sometimes I'm just, you know, I tell him I don't want to talk about softball. But yeah, just self-assessment and, you know, seeing where you're at the end of each year. And I think it also just experience and maturing a little bit as well. Obviously, I wish I would have done that earlier, but first 2 years are learning years. So, you know, you're just changing that environment, and it is what it is. But I definitely wouldn't change anything for the world, and I'm happy that I get a new year. So.
Well, as somebody who doesn't necessarily know you, but I know you through your dad and mom's posts, because I literally watch every video of you slapping a ball to third and beating somebody out and stealing a base and scoring. And I love watching your approach at the plate. I'm a baseball player, but I love watching, like, it's almost a strategic mind. It's like chess for you. Like, I'm watching you when you get to the plate, that there's a plan. Like, you know, 4 moves ahead what you're going to do.
You have to have a plan. If you don't have a plan, then you're setting yourself up for failure. So, you know, I do definitely look at, like, the pitch. I look at what the pitcher has been throwing me, what the field's set up like, what's the count, what's the score, where my runner's on base, you know, is the ground hard enough to bounce the ball? It's all, like, dependent on the environment and the situation you're put in. So, yeah, it definitely is like a chess game.
I love it.
So. Well, have a great rest of your conversation.
Thanks, son. Appreciate
it.
it.
Help me set up the net.
I will. I will help you set up the net.
The net.
Look at that. Yeah.
The softball net.
Can you close the door, honey? Thank you.
That's awesome. That was an impromptu, just so everybody knows.
Impromptu. That wasn't set up at all. But yeah. Yeah, it makes me very, very proud to just listen to kind of what she's saying, because it's not scripted, Matt. And, you know, it's things that she's learned either from her coaches or, you know, we feel from mom and dad too along the way, where, you know, you mature when you leave home and you go away and you learn all these different things. And, you know, people that are listening, you know, kind of take that is that, you know, it's very important early on to teach your kids. You know, you might think that they may not be listening, but they kind of do listen. And, you know, until they mature and they figure it out and they think back and say, you know what mom and dad said are, you know, I see it. And then they, you know, so he's, you know, it's good stuff, really good stuff.
One thing I wanted to ask you your opinion, because I don't know the answer to this one, but for me, so you get these, I'm in the speaker world, I'm in the coaching world, like the ethereal life coaching world. I don't consider myself those things, but I have to be in that environment and have to have interactions with people that are in that world willingly. There's a lot of discussion on where do things importance wise list in your world, like marriage, family, money, like all that everybody talks about? What should be the most important thing in your life? And while I think my wife and I, we obviously are in love, we obviously care about each other, we obviously support each other and are committed to one another, but we made a conscious decision. We sat down and talked about it. This was a planned event. It wasn't just sort of materialized. We decided very early on, when we wanted to have kids, that we were going to give our 110% effort into creating human beings that go out into the world and are successful and represent our family, the lineage of our family and us specifically. And it was a tag team event. And we sacrificed a lot of things for ourselves. We didn't go on many vacations. We didn't, we're not going out and having date night every night like that. That's just not how we're wired, because we made a decision that we were going to focus our collective energy and our gifts into raising two human beings, my daughter and my son, to be the best human beings that the world could possibly have, because that's how the world continues to become great, is when you send great people out into the world. What are your thoughts? I know how you raised your kids, but what was your plan with your wife when you decided to become parents?
Well, as you know, Matt, there's no book that you could open up and it tells you exactly the things that that are said. So you just hopefully do the right thing, based on what's going on and how you can you feel that's the right things to do as parents. So you teach those things, and you try to have your kids, every opportunity that you get, I think you try to teach them something. Now, of course, they're not going to understand it all the time, and there's going to be times where you think it goes in one ear and out the other. So it's it's a struggle, but I will say they do listen, and I think it's important that we do that as parents, because we are, like you had said earlier, we're cultivating the people of tomorrow out there, and to kind of see as they grow and go out in the world and live in the world. They definitely kind of mimic you a little bit. I hear things that I say, and then the greatest thing is to hear your daughter or your son kind of echo those same things. And I think it's really the most important job as parents. I mean, and I truly believe, I remember being a new parent years ago, and somebody told me that the toughest job that you will ever have is being a parent. And you kind of listen to it and you're like, okay, I get it, whatever. But then as years go on, you kind of say, wow, this job is tough, being a parent. You go through so many different things, and you're never really prepared for a lot of these things. So you just kind of go with it, and you try to think back, okay, what would my parents do, or what's the right thing to do? And you hope you do the right things. And I feel now that, my wife, Kelly, and I, we've done a pretty good job with our kids. And I would have to say, Matt, the greatest thing that I can ever hear from somebody, whether it's a friend, and I even got this from strangers, is when someone comes up to you and say, hey, your daughter or your son, they're good kids. And to hear that just validates everything that you've done as parents along the way. And you're like, you know what? That's just great to hear that, your kids have grown up, they're in this world now, and they're looked at as good people. And I can see that with my kids. I don't know if it's just the millennials, as you know, where they're not as they don't communicate like you and I did, because we just didn't have all the technology that we do today. And I find kids that they struggle with communication. And that was one thing with my kids, where we would always kind of push them towards, I know you're talking to this adult, but I want you to talk to that adult. And I know it's a little challenging, or you might be a little nervous, but talk to that person. And I'll tell you, I think it's probably the best thing we've done, because I can see my kids now talking with adults, and it's like, it's seamless. And we'd always would tell them, that's important, because one day you're going to be interviewing for a job, and you're going to be, 18, 19, 20, and you're going to be talking to someone that's, a lot older than you. And you have to be able to, feel comfortable and communicate with that person. And that starts, I think, at a younger age. So one thing I would love to see is more communication with kids to adults, and not feel nervous about that. I love seeing younger kids, and I know sometimes I probably make them feel real nervous, but I'll just go up and start talking to them. And I look in their eyes, Matt, and they're amazed. Like, why is this adult talking to me? And I just try to, get them a little bit in an uncomfortable position, but to just see if they're, able to communicate. And I think that's important for kids as they grow, to be able to communicate, because that's the one important thing in this world, where if you can do that, you're going to be successful, as you know.
Yeah, I love, as you know, I'm an intense guy. I'm a lot to some people think I'm a lot, and I get that, and I wear it with pride, because I believe that I got to where I am based on a bunch of other people's influence and mentorship and guidance, and I'm very proud of the person I am. And one of the things as a father, you can only imagine if that's micro intense inside the four walls of my house. If people think I'm intense out in the world, imagine in my home. And I'm as equally hard as I am loving, and I am as attentive and involved in my kids' lives as they give me in return. And that's a rule. My son said to me the other day, and my son's a very good swimmer, but my son is me at 17. He could study for 5 minutes, go get 100 on a test, and then I ask him what his test was about, and he'll say, I don't know. And that's my son. And I know that now. So I'm able to raise my son knowing his next 10 moves, because I've done them, and knowing his potential. So my goal is to always identify those moments of yeah, I see what's happening here. And you sort of have to let them screw up a little bit, but then give them those course corrections that they don't know they need to make yet. And I didn't have that in my life when I was younger. No one called me on my shit and left me to figure shit out. I was just I was always able to just roam free and do whatever I wanted. But my son, my birthday was a couple weeks ago, and he wrote in my card, he said, "Thank you for not being my best friend, but being my father." He goes, because I would never be where I am if you were my best friend. And I am his best champion. I love my son. I want my son to be the very best he can possibly be, and I want him to succeed in everything he does. But I'm not going to be his best friend, because that's not my job.
Right.
My job is to raise him, teach him,
absolutely.
and guide him. And the fact that he recognized that there's that differentiation and that what I'm doing has value in his life. Because I'd said to him, so and this all started with, he asked me why I was so involved in Becca's swimming. I said, "Why do you think I am?" He goes, "Because she's good." I said, "Not even remotely the reason why." And he goes, "Then why?" I said, "Because she's invested in it." I said, "And I want to be her biggest supporter if she's invested in it."
Yep.
I said, "I'm just waiting for you to be invested in something." I said, "Whatever that is, if you want to be the world's greatest potato chip salesman, I will figure out how to be invested in your potato chip sales business." Yeah. I said, "I will support you. I will guide you. I will go to every potato chip sale you need." I said, "But I need you to be invested in something." Yeah. I said, "Right now you are me, just sort of maneuvering like a ghost from different. I could be hanging out with the drug dealers or hanging out with the nerds. And that could be within a 5-minute change. I could do anything." And I was never invested in anything. And I want my son to be invested. I said, if swimming's not your thing, and he's a fantastic swimmer. He's a Division I level swimmer, but he hates it. I said, I'm not going to force you to love swimming, but whatever you become invested in something, if it's the military, I'll move to whatever base you're stationed at, just so I can be involved in you being in the military, whatever that is. I just want to be invested in something with you, but I'm not going to tell you what to be invested in and force you down a road that you're not emotionally or physically willing to put in the effort to be invested. I said, but that's why with Becca, it's easy for me to support her, because her level of investment is still 10 times greater than anything I could ever give her. I'm just there to make sure when she falls, I catch her.
Yep.
And that's it. And I said, I just want that for you. And he's figured that out. And, you know, he said, oh, I want to go to West Point. And I said, well, I haven't seen yet that you want to go to West Point. And he goes, what do you mean? I said, what did you do this week to get ready for West Point? And he goes, like he had no answer. And I'm like, I said, do you know what West Point is going to be?
Did you do a little research?
Said, 4 years of that. I said, are you prepared if West Point started tomorrow to begin that process? The answer is no. I said, so I have, you know, I'm going to be able to make some phone calls to get Senate letters and the things that he needs to be qualified to go into West Point. I said, but I'm not making those phone calls until I see an investment from you. I said, because right now you're just going to college. That's all I see. You're smart. You're going to go to college because that's what I want for you. But you're not West Point yet. When you're ready to be West Point, that's when we'll jump into that. And I will open up every arsenal I got to help you. I said, but you got to prove it to me. And that's really, when it comes to being a parent, for me, is that you have to give them the foundation. You have to see where their natural instincts and interests go, and then find out whether or not they are willing to be invested in something. And if it's education, my daughter's attention to detail with academics, and he was in the science or robotics or something, I would be all in that. Not because he's going to be the greatest at that, because I believe if you're invested in something, you can be great at it.
Yeah. No, it's so true. And that's the reason why, like you said, my daughter's going out to, do some hitting right now. I didn't tell her, hey, you should go do it. It was her, because she knows that even though I'm not playing right now, I need to stay sharp, and she'll do that. Or she'll go out and she'll ask me. So the same thing, Matt. They're invested, and I'm happy to be along the ride because you came to me and you want this, and until that happens, we'll just stay on the sideline until you do it. But once you go forward with it and we see it, man, I'll support you in any way I can.
So I'll give you one quick story of my daughter. So as you know, I mentor kids a lot, and I work with a lot of high school student athletes at my business, and I set up a leadership program, and I was doing all this extra work with all these local kids in the area. And Becca was in high school, and she pulled me aside and she goes, Dad, why do you do all this for these kids, but you don't do that for me? I said, what is it you want me to do for you? Like, what is it that I'm doing that you're interested in? And she goes, well, you're helping all these kids become great leaders and great civic-minded, servant-leading people and athletes at the same time. I said, well, that's not your father doing that. That's Matt, the human, the person that's going out and being a servant. I said, when I'm your dad, I have multiple different personalities that I have to mold myself into depending on what's going on. I said, but if you want that, I can't be, come here, baby, let me give you a hug, and tough on you at the same time. I said, I have the luxury of not having an emotional connection the way that I do with you, with these other kids, so I can lead them in a different way. I said, now, if you want that, I can do that with you, and I would be honored to do that. I said, but you have to understand that how I talk to you and the things I say to you will not be Dad to Becca. This will be Coach Matt talking to Rebecca Cubbler. And the things I'm going to expect from you are from that level. I said, now, if you say I want my dad back, that goes on pause, and I'm back. I said, but you can't yo-yo me. I said, this isn't as you manipulate the situation to no, that's too hard. I want Dad back. I said, so I'm well aware that that's a potential. I said, so if you want this, then let's go down that road. I said, and when we're done that process, for the day or that hour or whatever we're doing, that gets shut off, and Dad's back. I said, but you can't pick while we're in the moment, dad, coach, dad, coach, dad, coach. So when I saw that her investment level in her future was, I want to become a better leader, I want to become mentally stronger and physically stronger, that's when things opened for her. Because up until then, she had never, I don't know if you know this, but she had never won a race until midway through 9th grade. Never came in first. And she had been swimming for 7-8 years and never once tasted victory.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until she started working with me, and not that I did any of this, but her investment in her own future is what opened the door for her. Not not I go to practice 5 times a week like everyone else or whatever. There was the extra work she put in, that understanding that something's missing. And quite frankly, it was during the time when the Springford girls were winning our state championships for basketball. And I was their strength coach and their mental coach. That's when that was all happening. And she saw success of these strange girls that she doesn't know who they are and they don't have any real affiliation with me, but all of a sudden they're achieving greatness. And I do believe that a lot of it had to do with the fact that these were the strongest kids in the conference. And mentally they understood what competition meant and how to win and how to come back from loss and how to overcome obstacles. And those things are important in athletics more so than just physical ability, because physical ability, you're going to find someone that's just as good as you. And then when you go head to head, the one that worked the hardest is the one that usually comes out on top. And that Michael Jordan thing just started the other day.
I saw it last night.
My
God.
God.
Yeah.
That's why he's the greatest player on the planet. That's why, and I wasn't a Kobe fan, but the reason why Kobe was the next greatest guy probably is because of that. And that's a choice. And that's why I was asking Anna, why did you decide to parallel path academics and athletics and be great at both? Because that's another level of, that's Mamba shit right there. You know what I'm saying?
Mamba.
Like, you know what I'm saying?
That's all great stuff.
So listen, man, we could do this all day long. Next time we're going to do it with an actual beer. Which would,
this was really good, Matt. I learned a lot today, but it was really good to chat with you about it and talk about our pasts and our kids, and that's what we're here for. So I appreciate you having me on.
Well, I loved having Anna do the impromptu stop-in too. So that made it real for everybody that's going to be watching or listening, and gave a face to the name. And
absolutely,
it was great to hear her own words on how she processes things and the way she looked at her career, and it's just awesome. But listen, brother, I loved having this time with you. I loved it was a great idea. I'm glad you reached out and brought it up to me. I think it's going to help a lot of people. This will be released tonight. I'm putting this out tonight. And I can't wait to see where our kids' lives, whether it's with sports, without sports, just seeing how they dominate the next phase of their life.
And you know what? It's a good question, but I think I already have a pretty good answer. That they will dominate because of all that we just talked about, and they're just set up for success. All the things that they've done, all the attention to detail. It's not like they're going into this, open-minded. They know exactly what they want to do. They're going to tackle every challenge that comes to them. And, it's not going to be easy, but they're going to be successful. Anna's going to, I can already see it. She's going to be a successful nurse. Whatever she wants to do, she's going to be successful at because she sees it. And she's worked hard, and, she's got those successes all through her life. Couple times where she's got knocked down, but she got back up, so she's going to be successful. Becca's going to be successful, and this is kind of the blueprint that we talked about today. So I guess anybody who has younger kids, hopefully they take a little bit out of it and say, this is some good stuff that we can use for life lessons, and hopefully it'll help.
I appreciate it. Hang tight. I'm going to close out the show. We'll talk off air. Everybody, thank you. This was a very special, different style 2 Dates in a Dash podcast. Again, if anybody wants to find out more about what I'm doing, go to mattcubbler.com. This will be posted tonight. It'll be on all of the social medias for me, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And I truly do appreciate it. If you're a parent out there and you have kids that have a want and a desire to be great at something, no matter what it is, whether it's sports or anything, make sure that you give them those opportunities. Make sure it's an intentional process that you've created as a parent for your kids to be successful, and then teach them how to have their own process that helps them when you're not always going to be the one that's going to be there, that they have to have this internal mechanism inside of them that helps propel them forward. And I think if you listen to anything today, I think that's something that you can take away. And then finally, make sure that your kids are invested in themselves. Hold them accountable to that, but then be there once you see that investment, that you give them everything that you possibly can to make sure that they have the ability to be successful, and then use those tools for the rest of their life. So thank you, everybody. God bless, and go out and be kind to one another.